My grandfather left me his entire estate worth $3,500,000. The parents who cut me off at 18 showed up to the will reading, grinning. Of course, we'll manage it for you. But when the judge read the next page, their smiles shattered. Hey Reddit, grief does strange things to people. It brings out love in some, and greed in others. When my grandfather passed away, I thought it would bring our family together. Instead, it exposed every crack that had been quietly forming for years. I grew up closer to my grandfather than anyone else. He was my best friend, my mentor, and honestly the only person who ever believed in me. When my parents kicked me out at 18, told me I was on my own because I refused to follow their plan for my life, he was the one who showed up with a suitcase, a warm meal, and a simple promise. You'll never be alone as long as I'm here. He meant it. For years, he supported me, guided me, and even helped me through college when my parents refused to. So when he passed, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. The funeral was small, quiet, dignified. But even then, I could feel the tension in the air. My parents showed up late, wearing black suits and fake sympathy. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue that stayed perfectly dry. Dad placed a stiff hand on my shoulder. He loved you, he said flatly. But you know he loved us all equally. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew that wasn't true. After the funeral, I went back to my small apartment. I sat there, surrounded by silence, and stared at the last letter he'd written to me. The one he'd left on his desk, addressed in his neat handwriting, for my granddaughter. My pride. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. But 3 weeks later, I received another letter, this time from the family lawyer. The subject line made my heart stop. Notice of will reading. Attendance required. The reading was scheduled for the following Monday at a small courthouse downtown. When I arrived, my parents were already there, sitting side by side, whispering to each other with wide, smug smiles. My mother said when she saw me. You came. Yes, I replied quietly. My father smirked. Well, I suppose it's only fair that you're here when the estate is distributed. Don't worry, we'll make sure you're taken care of. His tone made my stomach twist. That phrase, we'll take care of you, had always meant one thing. We'll control you. The lawyer, Mr. Daniels, entered the room, a calm older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He opened his briefcase, set a thick folder on the table, and said, "Thank you all for being here. Let's begin." The sound of papers shuffling filled the silence. He cleared his throat. As per the last will and testament of Mr. Charles Whitmore, the entirety of his estate, including property, assets, and investments, is to be passed on to his granddaughter. He looked up at me, smiling gently, Ms. Evelyn Whitmore. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I thought I'd misheard. My mother's mouth fell open. My father blinked rapidly. Wait, what did you just say? Mr. Daniels repeated, the estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, is to be transferred in full to Ms. Evelyn Whitmore. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came my father's laugh, forced, strained, bitter. Well, of course. Of course, that's what he wanted. But obviously, she can't handle that kind of responsibility. We'll manage it for her. He looked right at me, that familiar condescending smile on his face. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll take care of the estate for you. Mom nodded eagerly. Yes, we'll make sure it's handled properly. You can't just expect to run things on your own. Their confidence made my stomach turn. They hadn't even finished hearing the will, and already they were claiming ownership of something that wasn't theirs. But then Mr. Daniels cleared his throat again. Actually, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I'd advise you to wait before making assumptions. There's a second page. Mom smiled thinly. I'm sure it's just legal formalities. He adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. To my son and daughter-in-law, you made it clear when Evelyn was 18 that she was no longer part of your responsibility. Therefore, you will receive no part of this estate, nor will you have any right to its management or control. My parents froze. Dad's face went red. Excuse me? Mr. Daniels continued reading. If either of you attempts to challenge this will, you will forfeit access to the family trust and all remaining assets previously designated to you. He turned the page slowly. And there's more. Mom's voice cracked. There's more? Mr. Daniels nodded. Yes. There's a message for both of you. He unfolded a handwritten note, the same familiar handwriting I'd seen on my letter, and read it aloud. To my son and his wife. Evelyn may not have been the child you were proud of, but she is the one who made me proud every single day. This is her inheritance, not because of blood, but because of character. My eyes filled with tears. I covered my mouth as the words echoed in the courtroom. My father stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. He must have been manipulated. Mr. Daniels didn't even flinch. Sir, this document was written in my presence. Your father was of sound mind. My mother's voice was trembling now. But he can't just cut us off. Mr. Daniels looked at her, calm but firm. He did. They sat down, stunned, as he handed me a sealed envelope. This was meant for you, Ms. Whitmore, he said softly. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single line written in my grandfather's handwriting. Don't let them make you small again. This is your second chance, use it well. That's when I finally understood. He didn't just leave me money. He left me freedom. Freedom from their control, from their judgment, from their manipulation. But my parents weren't done yet. They whispered furiously to each other. Then my father stood again, pointing at me. You'll regret this, he hissed. You think this makes you powerful? You're nothing without us. I met his glare and said quietly, funny, I've been doing just fine without you for years. They stormed out of the room, and for the first time in my life, I felt the kind of peace that only truth can give. But little did I know, that peace wouldn't last. Because the moment they realized what else my grandfather had left behind, a hidden clause that would change everything, their smiles didn't just fade. They shattered. And when the judge turned the page and read the final line of my grandfather's will, my parents' faces went pale, because they realized the one person they tried to control was now the one person they could never touch again. When Mr. Daniels turned to the last page of my grandfather's will, the sound of paper against wood felt louder than any thunder. My parents sat stiffly beside me, faces pale, jaws tight, as if the truth itself had become too heavy to bear. The air in the room felt electric. Everyone could sense something big was coming. And then, in that soft, steady voice, Mr. Daniels began to read. There is one final condition, he said, regarding the transfer of assets to Evelyn Whitmore. My father leaned forward, his voice dripping with false hope. So there's a clause. I knew it. He wouldn't leave that much money unchecked. Mr. Daniels adjusted his glasses and continued. In the event that Evelyn's parents attempt to contact her for financial support, request access to any part of this estate, or attempt to challenge this document in any court of law, their names will be permanently added to the legal disinheritance list, and they will lose access to all family benefits and properties tied to the Whitmore Trust. Mom gasped. Dad's face flushed deep red. What? He snapped. That's not legal. Mr. Daniels looked up calmly. It's completely legal, sir. And binding. Mr. Whitmore was thorough. Mom's voice broke into a whisper. So, if we ask her for help, we lose everything? He nodded. That's correct. The silence that followed was the kind that cuts through bone. My father sank back into his chair, his pride deflating with every breath. Mom just stared at me, eyes wide, wet, like she'd finally realized what decades of cruelty had cost her. My grandfather had protected me in a way no one ever had before. Even from beyond the grave, he made sure they could never use me again. Mr. Daniels smiled softly at me. Your grandfather was very proud of you, Evelyn. He made that clear in every conversation we ever had. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded once, then closed the folder gently. That concludes the reading. And just like that, it was over. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling as if they were relearning what strength felt like. My parents didn't move. They just sat there, two people who had spent years trying to make me small, now shrinking in their own silence. As I reached the door, I heard my father mutter under his breath, "She doesn't deserve it." I turned back. My voice didn't shake this time. No, I said quietly. I earned it. And then I left. The following months felt like a dream. The estate transfer finalized. The house, the land, the accounts, all officially mine. But more than the money, it was the message behind it that stayed with me. My grandfather hadn't left me wealth to spoil me. He'd left it to empower me. To remind me that worth isn't defined by who abandons you, but by who believes in you when no one else does. I used part of the inheritance to start something he'd always dreamed of, a scholarship foundation for kids who'd been cut off by their families, just like I once was. Every time I signed another approval letter, I could almost hear his voice whispering, "That's my girl." And for the first time in years, I felt proud of the person I'd become. But my parents didn't stop there. Oh no, not them. When greed meets desperation, it doesn't die quietly. They tried to sue. They filed claim after claim, each one weaker than the last. They even accused me of coercion, saying I manipulated my grandfather. It didn't work. The court threw out their case before it even reached trial. The will was airtight. My grandfather had made sure of that. When the final dismissal came, I stood outside the courthouse, the same place where my father had once humiliated me years ago, and I felt something powerful, not revenge, but release. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And that day, it whispered in my heart, "You're free." That night, I drove to my grandfather's estate, the one he'd built with his own hands. The gates opened silently as I pulled in, and for a moment, I just sat there in the driveway, looking at the house glowing under the soft porch lights. It didn't feel like wealth. It felt like home. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture he'd built, the books he'd read, the old piano he used to play after dinner. When I reached his study, I stopped. On the desk sat an old photo of the two of us, me at 10 years old, smiling, him with that same proud twinkle in his eyes. I picked up the photo and whispered, "You did it, Grandpa. You really did it." Then I opened the drawer. Inside was the letter I'd never opened before, the one addressed for my granddaughter. My pride. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It read, "If you're reading this, it means my time is up. Don't let sadness chain you. Build something beautiful with what I've left you, a life of your own choosing. Remember, wealth is not what you inherit, but what you grow. And you, Evelyn, will grow more than I ever could." I pressed the letter to my heart and smiled through tears. He believed in me when no one else did. And even now, he was still guiding me forward. People think revenge is loud, but real revenge is quiet. It's peace. It's success. It's walking away from those who tried to break you and never needing to look back. Because the truth is, I didn't need to destroy my parents. They did that themselves the moment they chose greed over love. All I had to do was keep growing,